Oh, hey, it's David Heatley here from Cycling Inform, and welcome to tonight's webinar. Now, I just wanted to check that you can hear and see me okay. So just while we're waiting for everybody to load up into this webinar, just type on the right-hand side of the screen, just let me know whether you can see and hear me okay. I'd hope to get into this webinar and get 2 minutes into it and find out that nobody can hear me. So just give us a thumbs up or a yes so I can hear and see you. And also, while you're at it, just introduce yourself. Let me know what your first name is. Let me know where you're calling in from. Of course, tonight's webinar is all about training methodologies. It's one of my favourite subjects in cycling. Fantastic. All right, we're just getting some responses coming through. Seems like everybody can see and hear me okay, so that's fantastic. So just introduce yourself while we're waiting for people to load up into the webinar. Just introduce yourself. Let me know where you're calling in from. And maybe perhaps let me know what you want to get out of tonight's webinar. I hope to answer some of your questions tonight, so we'll see how we go. Now, this webinar is going to go for about 45 minutes. I'm going to be providing a little bit of training content, just introducing you to our online training centre, and then we're going to go into answering your questions. So my preference is to answer questions with people that are online. Fantastic, and this is awesome. So it looks like everybody's lining up. So look, we'll get into it. I'm just going to share my screen and we'll get into the presentation. So here we go, training methodologies, what's working and what's not in 2020. So let's get into it. I just click on it and we're ready to go. All right, so the first thing is just, we're going to be here for about 40 minutes, maybe 45, see how we go. So just if you've got anything running in the background on your computer, just close it down. And also if you've got Netflix going in the background, your kids are watching Netflix and those sort of things, just shut that down as well. Just gives the opportunity to free up the bandwidth. We've got NBN here in Adelaide. It's a pretty good connection. So the feed coming out of here is pretty good, but sometimes the feed's not so great at your end. So if the screen goes a little bit fuzzy, there is a little panic button or there's a reset button at the top of the webinar. You can hit that, it'll reset it, and it'll drop you straight back into the webinar where we are during webinar. So if you have any issues, just hit that, and of course, turn off your cell phone and just make sure your distractions are not around you, like the kids in wherever watching TV, and just make sure you've got a good clear 40 minutes. All right, so we'll get into it. So in this webinar, I'm going to be talking about some of the more common training methods and how we have developed them to get the best results. I'll also have a brief break where I'll show you around online training coaching membership portal. And in the second half, I'll be answering your training questions, and priority obviously will be given to people on the webinar. All right, so are you committed to being engaged? Now, this is really important. I'd hate for you to get to the end of the webinar and say, oh, that was useless, didn't get anything out of it. And I know that when I'm in the same room with somebody that's very experienced at a particular topic and I'm interested in that topic, I like to ask questions. So I do engage you to be engaged and start asking questions, because I'd hate for you to get to the end of the webinar and have your questions unanswered. So certainly give us a yes that you're engaged, you're committed to being engaged. Just type in yes and just let me know that you are committed to being engaged and you want to get the most out of this webinar. So just give us a yes and we'll get into it. All right, so now, this is probably the most fundamentally important thing that I want to talk to everybody about, is that we are different to the pros. And I know a lot of people are really interested to know what training the professionals are doing, professional cyclists. And that's great. Look, I understand the intrigue, but the thing is that we are, as athletes, we're not full-time athletes, we are really, really, really different to a professional cyclist, and therefore the training that we're doing has to be fundamentally different. So I just want you, just straight off the bat, to just understand that what works for a professional cyclist at their level will not really work for us. So, and the reasons for that is that we've got family work commitments. We're not committed 100% to our training. We've got work commitments, we've got family commitments. We have a limited amount of time to train. We generally are unable to reach our genetic potential because of the limitations around the amount of time that we have available to train. So fundamentally, the training methodologies that the professionals are using are different to what we should be using. So obviously we aren't 21 men anymore, so we don't really have the ability to recover as well as professional athletes either. And, you know, in a lot of cases we are desk bound. So, so most training methodologies, if you haven't figured it out already, have been developed to specifically improve the performance of top athletes in their sport. That's where all the money is being spent. And certainly at the elite level, that's where a lot of the training methodologies have been developed. Now, I'm not saying that they're wrong. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that in a lot of cases, they can be a really poor fit for today's recreational riders and club level racing cyclists that don't have the same sort of depth that a professional athlete has. So I hope that makes sense. Give us a yes if that's sort of starting to turn on the light bulbs in your head. So let's talk about some of the methodologies. Now, in the 1980s, that's when I first started riding a bike. It was all about long, slow distance. So we would basically go out during summer, ride a stack load of kilometers, and then we would race. We'd do a huge off-base season, and then we get race fit by racing. Now, that's still a very valid training method today. It's not terribly time efficient, but it's still a very, very valid way to train. And I'm sure that there's probably professionals out there. Yeah, David, I wish I was 21 again. You know, it's still a valid method of training, and I'm sure there are professionals out there that are using this method to train. There's obviously been a little bit more science being developed since the 1980s. Now in the 1990s, the periodization training methodology came out from the Eastern Bloc. Now, it was specifically developed to prepare athletes for the Olympics. So it was, and in the Eastern Bloc, you know, the lifestyle, they would start with kids that were, you know, at a very early age, and they would start them on a program and then slowly work on developing them into professional athletes. And then at some point, you know, if they got the opportunity and they were good enough, they'd go to the Olympics. And of course, the periodization training came into effect from the Eastern Bloc and specifically to prepare athletes for the Olympics. So, you know, the sort of that methodology has been distilled down into this sort of abbreviated version that's not a 4-year or a 20-year cycle into, you know, doing 10 to 12 weeks of base and then doing 2 4-week build blocks and then doing 4 to 6 weeks of specialization and a week taper and then race. The biggest issue with the periodization training model is that you only peak one event. That's what it was developed specifically for, was to train up and peak for one particular event. And that's not great for the rest of the season. Now, it was never required that you would have a periodization program for an athlete competing for the Olympics, having to peak for various events throughout the year. So, because they're only peaking for one, and that was the Olympics, and it was every 4 years. And generally, the athletes that were going to the Olympics won, you know, in that 4-year block, those athletes wouldn't really be attending the next Olympics. They'd have a new, fresh load of athletes that would go through in the following 4-year, you know, the Olympics 4 years later. So, so it's not great. It's not a great methodology for us as recreational racing cyclists, where we need to taper and peak for multiple events during the year. And certainly a lot of athletes that I coach are always wanting to do very well all the way through the year. And especially here in Australia, certainly over in America, the athletes I'm coaching in America, athletes I'm coaching in the UK, they all want to do really well all year round. So periodization is not a great model for that, but it's fantastic for, you know, peaking athletes for the Olympics and stuff like that. Now, more recently, high intensity training's come in vogue again, and kind of likened it to skip all the periodization phases and smash yourself silly doing speed work as you don't have much time, and then race. Or you smash yourself silly doing high intensity efforts and then you do your recreational ride. Now, the issue is it's really good for seasonal riders that have already built a fantastic base and just want to lift, but it's terrible prep for recreational club level racing cyclists if they don't have much base. And the other big thing about high intensity training is that it's not sustainable. Now, I'll come in to talk about that a little bit later on when we talk about speed work. So, but just understand that training methods are not new. contrary to popular belief, current training methods are absolutely not new. So long, slow distance training or base building was prescribed during through the 1800s through to around 1930. So it's very popular, and it certainly went for a long period of time. Then interval training became popular in the 1940s and 1950s. So interval training is not that new either. Then everybody backflipped into long, slow distance training methods again in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, and that's where I caught the tail end of that when I first started riding. In the 1990s, there was a massive resurgence back into interval training, along with the introduction of periodization training, and it still remains quite popular today. And HIIT is obviously promoted at gyms and pumped up with the whole instructor's war cries of "go hard" or "go home," and it's been touted as being the holy grail to solving all training problems, and that's unfortunately so wrong. And I'll talk a little bit about that later on, about how high intensity training is still important, but it's certainly not the holy grail for working on developing your overall fitness. All right, so what is the answer to resolving poor performance? So the first thing you need to look at is, if you're not getting the results that you want, then don't blame yourself or your equipment or the lack of having equipment. Look at the training you're doing and your headspace now, because within the training that you're doing and the headspace that you've got will be the answer to your training problems. And certainly I was talking to one of my clients that's just come on board today, and he's got an issue. He's getting dropped in fast-moving bunches and on climbs, one of the classic problems that a lot of cyclists have. And it was very clearly obvious what was going wrong. I had a look at his training and training peaks, and blindingly obvious what was going wrong. And we were just putting together a training plan to address that issue with him. So, the thing is that a lot of the issues that you currently have with your performance can be absolutely fixed through doing the right type of training and getting your headspace sorted out. And it's interesting because in the last couple of years, I've been really working on with my athletes around this headspace stuff, and it's really becoming more and more important with the work that I'm doing with my clients, and making sure that their head is in the right space to be able to be motivated and to be positive around what they're doing, and to get really, really good results out of their training, and also to build confidence in their ability that they can do some pretty amazing things with their riding. So anyway, so 12 years of testing with hundreds of thousands, or not hundreds of thousands, but thousands of cyclists. I've been working with, well, I've said past 11, but it's actually past 12 years. I've been personally working full time as a cycling coach, addressing these common performance issues. Now, this is what I've learned. How good a rider you are is directly related to the training that you're doing and what's going on in your head. And it's the training that you're doing in the headspace that governs your performance. Now, in my last webinar, I talked a lot about goal setting and planning and getting your head sorted out. So if you haven't had a look at that webinar, certainly it's up on YouTube. If you want, you can email me and I'll send you the link, or you can just go to YouTube, type in Cycling Inform, and you'll see the latest webinar that I had last month was all about getting that powerful reason why and getting your headspace sorted out. Now, we only really touched on the subject around that. There's a lot of work that we're doing with athletes about making sure that their head's in the right place. But look, outside of that, everything else is just noise. Whether we're on Strava, whether we've got power meters, whether we're using a heart rate monitor, what wheels we're using, what bike we're riding, it's all noise around the two fundamentals, which is what's going on in your head and the training that you're doing. Those are the two key important things that you should be looking at to improve your performance. And like I say, everything else is noise. It's really marginal gains. And I know, look, don't get me wrong, I love beautiful bikes and I love beautiful wheels and I love expensive bike stuff and I love the technology and it's all great and it's very helpful tools. But a lot of that stuff's really only going to provide you with marginal gains. I mean, if you really want to get your performance sorted out, good quality training and also getting your head sorted out are two of the most powerful things you can do around getting it sorted out. All right, so we've been working, we've developed our own unique training methodology. I'll talk a little bit about that. And what we've done is we've combined a lot of these methodologies together into something that really works very efficiently with club level racing cyclists and also recreational riders. So while I'm on this, does anybody want to know about it? Just give us a yes, let me know whether you want to know a little bit about how we get our athletes very quickly up to speed and get their problems resolved. And the methods that we use. So give us a yes in the comments there. Let me know that you want to hear this. Otherwise, I'll just skip through the slides and we'll show you the online training center and then I'll answer your questions. So just let me know whether you're interested in finding out what methods we're using. All right, we're getting yeses coming through now. That's fantastic. Of course, that's what you're here for. All right, so let's start off with the benefits, all right? So the great thing about what we're doing here is that we're able to build, taper, and peak from multiple events during the year. So that's really important because I would assume that you want to build, taper, and peak from multiple events during the year. Just give us some yeses if that's definitely the case. I mean, you may find that you've got a really important race that you want to, or a really important ride that you may have during the year that's like your A ride, right? But you've also got other events through the year that you want to do pretty well at, and you want to be fresh and ready to do really well at. Yeah. All right. So the other good thing about our training methodology is that the training done this year will help you build for next year. And I'll talk a little bit about that later on because it's all part of the whole methodology around working with speed work. All right. Now, the other thing is that it greatly reduces the chance of burnout, and that's really closely related to the speed work thing as well. Due to closely monitoring performance, the performance management and the athlete's response to training. And this is one of the things is that when athletes are training, when you're training, there's a lot of training programs out there that you can get offline, on the internet, and you can download and you buy really cheaply. But really the secret is getting that feedback on, is the training working? Am I doing the right thing? And being able to do the performance management, understand the numbers around what you're doing, and whether you're actually meeting the numbers or exceeding the numbers, or that the training program actually is the right match for you, is very important. All right. So now, obviously, once we focus on what's working, it greatly improves the efficiency and effectiveness of your training. If you start working on the stuff that actually makes you go faster on the bike and improves your performance and your endurance, then that's obviously of a good thing. Especially when we've got really limited amount of time to train. And a lot of my athletes will have somewhere between 6 hours and 12 hours a week. That's generally about the spread. I mean, obviously I've got clients that have 20 hours a week. Fantastic. They usually don't have a wife and kids, but they've got 20 hours a week to train, and that's awesome. But a lot of my clients, I would assume that you'd be the same. You've got around 6 to 8 hours a week to train. And certainly there's a lot that you can do by getting your training really super efficient in that time. All right. So, and the other great thing about this is that the cyclist is motivated as they can quickly see and feel improvements, usually within the first 4 weeks of getting onto our training program. So here's some of the 5 common issues. Just let me know if any of those resonate with you. Not able to develop enough power, so constantly getting dropped from fast-moving bunches or on climbs. Just let me know. You don't have to tell me exactly which one or which ones of these are relating to you, but just give us some yeses if any of these start resonating with you. Training hard but not seeing results or any improvement. That's a very common thing that I see with my clients. Loss of drive or focus or confidence. I certainly see that. A lot of clients that come to me, they've had issues. They've been training hard, or they've been knocked around a bit. They haven't seen the results that they wanted, and they've lost their drive and focus and their confidence. Not having enough time to train is another big one, and having training interrupted with illness or injury. So, yep, number 1. Thanks, Ian. Yep, yeah. So, a lot of these are the general commons. They're generally the common ones. So, here's where we work it. So we keep it really simple, and I like simple. I don't know whether you like simple, but I find that things don't have to be complex to be really good. And sometimes keeping things really nice and simple can be very, very powerful. And it's certainly the case here. We don't have to make things super complex because fundamentally we want to address the fundamentals. Yeah, horrible summer in Sydney. You should be here in Adelaide. It's been pretty hot here too, but of course we've had the bushfires and stuff, and they've certainly impacted on our riding. So we break it down into 3 core elements: base, strength, and speed. all right? And they're fundamental to the makeup of an overall athlete. They need really these three components in their training. So if you're training, you need to be able to address these three components in it. And that's why we focus on them: base, strength, and speed. So I'll go through what they are. So aerobic base. So as we well know, aerobic base, it's a really super important. Now, it develops cardiovascular fitness. And I've got this saying, and it goes like this. It says, never underestimate the power of base training. And it's really interesting. I'll talk a little bit about that when we come to the speed work component. But aerobic-based training helps with all aspects of your riding. It's an incredibly important foundation. It prevents injury later on. It's usually missing from a lot of high-intensity training programs, and it's absolutely required for endurance events. And I want to say this, that if you're on a home trainer for an hour, smashing yourself silly, doing whatever interval training sessions, that session is not going to help you at all if you're out on the bike for more than 2 or 3 hours. All right. I just want you to understand that the difference between high intensity interval sessions on a home trainer, all right, for an hour is not going to help you 2 or 3 hours into a ride. If you're doing an event like the Peaks Challenge Falls Creek, 10 to 13 hours, you know, doing 1 hour interval sessions on a home trainer is not going to help you 6 hours into the Peaks Challenge Falls Creek. They are fundamentally different things, all right? So just understand that. And this is where this holy grail thing around speed work, it'll solve everybody's problem. Well, it's absolutely untrue, all right? So now don't get me wrong, speed training is important and it's an important component of training, but just understand that it's the aerobic base. It's spending time on the bike. And if you're into ultra endurance events like the Peaks Challenge Falls Creek, or you're on the bike for 160 k's or 120 k's, that's 3, 4, 5 hours on a bike, where you need to train yourself to be able to ride that distance. All right, doesn't matter how doesn't matter how fast you can ride. If you aren't able to ride for 6 hours comfortably, then you're not going to have a great 6 hour ride. I hope that makes sense. Give us some yeses if this starts making some sense to you. Now, obviously, there's a big difference between if you're in a criterium race, riding around for an hour. High-intensity interval training sessions, a fantastic match to criterium racing, but I want to make it clear that they're not, they're not like the holy grail to solving your endurance-based problems. So, yep, fully understand. Fantastic. We're getting some great yeses. All right, so absolutely, aerobic-based training is absolutely required. And like we've just, there's a couple of weeks now before the Peaks Challenge Falls Creek coming up. I've got a lot of athletes that I'm coaching for that event. And we've just finished our big blocks of big rides. And we include a couple of really big rides in that training program of 8 hours. And it's not about doing it hard or doing it fast. It's about actually spending time on the bike for 8 hours so that our clients get used to the fact that they're going to be on the bike for 8 hours. Now, that helps them in 2 ways. The first way it helps them is that obviously it helps build their endurance. So when they get 8 hours or 6 hours into the ride, they're not feeling like they're really, really stretching themselves. So from a physiological point of view, but also from a mental point of view, all right? So from a mental point of view, it's a lot easier to do a 10-hour ride if you've already done a couple of 6s and maybe an 8-hour ride. Does that make sense? Just give us some yeses if this makes sense. Now, the other important thing about aerobic-based training is that it's developed slowly and lost slowly. And I'll come to the reason why that's important a little bit later on. But aerobic-based training is developed slowly and lost slowly. So if you're an athlete, if you're a cyclist, and you're finding that you're really inconsistent in that 1 week you're really good and the next week you're just crap, or not good, sorry, I shouldn't use the word crap. The next week you're not very good. So you're good and you're not so good and you're all over the place. If you're finding that the performance is very inconsistent, then the area that you need to look at is your aerobic base, all right? And you're probably relying too heavily on speed, all right? Okay. Now, strength training. So strength training is the next component. So remember, we had these 3 components: base, strength, and speed. So strength training. Now, strength training comes in 2 forms. There's on-the-bike strength training and off-the-bike strength training. Now, modern society now requires us both on and off the bike strength training for stabilization and form. So we need to develop strength on the bike, and we need to also develop strength off the bike, right? And it's becoming more and more important to us. Years ago, racing cyclists used to come from blue collar. They were tradesmen, and they spend a lot of time doing very manual labor. But nowadays, a lot of our jobs are service-based. We're not, and if that's the case with you, then there's certainly a very heavy requirement on being able to develop good core strength and good core stability, both on the bike and off the bike, so that you're able to develop good power. Because the interesting thing about strength is that you can only develop as much power as you can stabilize. So I'm going to say that again. You can only develop as much power as you can stabilize. All right. So if you're not able to stabilize your power, you're not able to develop it. So if you're struggling to develop power for climbs or for sprints or for bunch surges, or for working really fast on the bike or time trials, then a lot of that's got to do with working on your stability. All right. Now, there's also a difference between developing sustained power and explosive power. So the training that we do for athletes that are doing sustained power is different to the training that we do to help athletes develop explosive power. Now, I'm not going to go into a lot of that tonight, but I just say that there is a difference between developing sustained power for things like endurance-based events and road racing, all right, and climbing hills, as opposed to explosive power that we would use for maybe track sprinting or criterium racing, or even the bunch sprint at the end of your local, bunch ride that you do, that explosive power. Now, they're two different types of power and they develop differently. All right, so now the off-the-bike strength training program needs to be relevant to the cycling, and unfortunately most aren't. They haven't been designed around cyclists. So there are a lot of strength and conditioning programs out there, and certainly over the years they've become a lot better. But when we first started coaching people in 2007, the strength and conditioning programs that we had available to us were pretty ordinary, and that's why we developed our own training programs. The other interesting thing about strength training is that, again, it's developed slowly and lost slowly. So it helps even out your performance throughout the year. And it means, like, if you're sick or ill for a short period of time, maybe a few days or a week, then it doesn't have a major impact on your overall performance, and you're able to quickly get on top of your training again. Okay, and same with aerobic-based training. So if you focus on strength training, aerobic-based training helps even things out. And I'll talk a little bit about how that works in the next couple of slides. So this is really important. Now, strength training you can do on the bike as well. And how we do that is we lower the cadence. All right, so aerobic-based training is usually done at higher cadences, and strength training is done at lower cadences. And by doing work at lower cadences, we're able to develop strength. Now, when we combine our aerobic training and our strength training together, we then get faster. All right, so it's building the two building blocks that enable the speed. All right, so we need both of them, strength and aerobic base. So aerobic fitness and strength come together, and then from there we build on top of that to build our speed. And that's where a lot of cyclists do go wrong. All right, so speed. Now, speed is done at the specialization part of the program. So that's later on. We've got to build aerobic base and strength. Now, the interesting thing about speed work is that it's developed quickly but lost quickly. And this is the issue with speed work. And it's the other biggest issue about speed work is that you can only really do it for short periods of time. Otherwise, if you keep on doing speed work over and over again, you get to a plateau and then you start going backwards. And I don't know if there's anybody that's experienced that in their training, where they've been training really hard, doing interval training and stuff, and then they get to a point where it just becomes all too overwhelming, usually within 6 to 8 weeks. Now, don't get me wrong, speed training is fantastic. It provides a great lift, and there's certainly a lot of research out there that back up the fact that speed work helps improve the athlete's overall speed. That's understandable. But what they don't take into account is that a lot of that research is based around 6 and 12-week blocks of speed training. They don't take into account what happens to the athlete after they continue to do speed work after 12 weeks. And that's the big issue. And that's what we're certainly seeing, because we have thrown speed work at athletes for longer than 12 weeks. And what we end up doing is burning out our athletes, and they just get really badly unmotivated. They start getting grumpy, overtrained, and they just get to a point where it just becomes too much. So there are limitations around how much speed work you can do. So it's very important that we do it towards the specialization or towards the end of your training cycle towards your major events, all right? Now, speed work's, like I mentioned, not sustainable. And speed, to get speed, you need to build it on combining base and strength, like I've mentioned. Now, if you've got a poor base and you've got poor strength, or you've got poor base and good strength, or you've got good strength and a poor base, it means that you're going to get poor speed lift. So you need to have a good foundation of base and a good foundation of strength to get a good lift from your speed work. Does that make sense? Give us some yeses. Let me know if this is starting to make sense. Maybe you're looking at your own training at the moment and thinking, oh, what was I thinking? So let's talk a little bit about how speed work works. So for those people that haven't heard my analogy on speed work, I talk about nitro, all right? So speed work's like adding nitro to a car, if that makes sense. So when we add nitro to a car, the car goes faster, right? When we take the nitro away, you're still left with the same car, right? So nitro, all the nitro is doing is just making the car go faster when the nitro is present. When the nitro is not present, you're still left with the same car. Now, what we want to actually do, just imagine that you're driving around a little Toyota Echo or something, like not a high performance car. You add nitro to it, it's going to be a bit faster. That's great. And that's what speed work does. But speed work doesn't create a bigger engine in the car. All right. So that where the bigger engine comes from is from doing aerobic-based training and strength training. That builds a bigger engine. So instead of driving around a little Echo, you're driving around in something a lot more high performance than that, all right? And then it just makes it easier. So you don't have to work the gear so much, and you don't really need the nitro because already, just with your bigger engine, you're already a lot better than the Toyota Echo, if that makes sense, all right? Now, of course, when you add nitro, when you start doing your speed work and you add nitro to that bigger engine, bigger car, then you get a lot faster. So that's how my analogy of speed work works. So it's just fundamentally understanding how that speed works. Fantastic. All right. So how we do our blocks is that we do 4 weeks of aerobic-based training, we do 4 weeks of strength training, we do 4 weeks of speed training, and then we cycle through and repeat them. Now, it depends on the athlete and where they come from and what their background is, depends on where we put those blocks in and where we start them. So, for example, if we had, 6 weeks to a major event with our athlete, then we would basically only be able to rely on whatever aerobic base the athlete had built, do a little bit of strength work, and then we'd do some speed work, and we'd use whatever base they had existing so that they would start doing really well, that they could build for the event. But obviously, if we've got 12 weeks, then we can run through all those 3 cycles. Now, if we've got 24 weeks, then we run through those cycles twice. All right, so it's very, very simple, but it's incredibly effective. And what happens is that all those benefits that I've talked about back here, I'll just go back to my slides. Able to build and taper and peak for multiple events during the year. Training this year helps build the training for next year. Greatly reduces the chance of burnout due to closely monitoring performance management, the athlete's response to training. Greatly improves the efficiency and effectiveness of the training because the athlete's a lot more fresher all the time. And we're able to get the cyclists peaking for multiple events. And obviously, because they're seeing results, we're basically building like this, right? So we're seeing results all the time. And so the cyclists are a lot more motivated. All right, so that's what we find, and we've been developing this over quite a few years, and it's worked out really well for us. All right, so let's go on to the next slide. So the benefits, like I say, low chance of burnout, able to peak with multiple events, fresh all year round as more recovery, build on performance year on year, less chance of injury and sickness, and more consistent results throughout the year. So is that all a good thing? Let me know if you think that's pretty amazing, if you're able to do all of that. So we're going to go, just let me know, I'm going to do a quick overview of our online training portal. So just give us some yeses if you're interested in having a look at some of the tools that we have available to our clients for those that haven't been initiated into our online training center. Just let us know if you want to have a bit of a sneak preview of what it looks like inside. give us some yeses, and then we'll get into answering people's questions. So if you've got any questions while you're on this webinar, just give us just start typing them in on the right hand side of the comment, and I will get into it. All right, so we're getting some yeses come through. So I will open up the online training center. So so here's our main website here, and of course if you want to have a look at our coaching portal here, we talk a little bit about the training and stuff. I've got a little video that explains some of the stuff that I've talked about tonight, but just in a very abbreviated version. And these are all the training plans that are available for our standard training plans here. All right, so we've got quite a few. We've got discipline-specific training programs, and we've got event training programs. So if there's any particular events that you want to train for, we've got 12 and 24-week training programs, depending on the type of event. So some of the longer events will have the 24-week training programs. Now that's part of the level of coaching that we do. So once we get into the online training center, you sign up, then you get access to the indoor training program. So I'll just go show you an example of one of the training programs. So this is, so we'll have a look at the LEATAP 2020. So we've got a stakeholder buy-in document that's really important for our stakeholders. And the reason why that's important is that when you start your training, it's just important to make sure that you negotiate with your stakeholders to make sure they're happy with the commitment that you're going to make to this training, because it doesn't matter how motivated you are if you obviously are having issues with your stakeholders, it's your family members, your work colleagues and those sort of things, then it's going to make it really difficult for you to get the training in. So that's why we always provide a stakeholder buy-in document. Then we have the specific training programs. And as part of those training programs, there's a whole lot of training resources. So we have indoor training videos. You can do these out on the road, and they basically guide you through the session, help you work on technique. And of course, like I mentioned, strength training is always a very important part of the component of training. So all of our training programs have strength training as part of them. So we've got these mobilizers, and then we've also got various phases of strength training that go along. Now these exercises take about 15 to 20 minutes and they're integrated into the program. Now for those people that are on Training Peaks, we can then load that program straight into Training Peaks for you. And the great thing about this is that if you're on a smart trainer, you can sync this up and the session will be loaded in. We're big on cadence, so all of our sessions have cadence. So we have the cadences indicated in the sessions itself, and these are based on your FTP. And of course, if you've got a Garmin computer, okay, I'll just load one of these up into my plan. But if you've got a Garmin computer or a smart trainer, you can actually download that session and run it up on your smart trainer. So if you're running Swift or TrainerRoad or any of those sort of platforms, then those will just carry across. And of course, if you're struggling a little bit with doing sessions on the indoor trainer, you can take these and load them up on your Garmin and you can just take them out on the road. So one of my clients I was talking to this morning, they wanted to do all this stuff out on the road. So they were actually going to take this session here, load it up into their Garmin and have the Garmin talk to them about what they should be doing. It just comes up on the instructions on the screen. So we've got some fantastic questions coming through. Awesome. So I won't delve too much on this this package here, but what I will do is I'll just go back to the main Cycling Informed website and the coaching side of things. All right, so we've got a few packages available. I'm just about to finish up here. So I've just got a few packages available that we have available. So you can basically, a 12-week cycle is $127, or you can sign up for the year. It's up to you. And that comes with the standard programs, pre-built training programs, unlimited email coaching support, and unlimited data review. So that's fantastic. So if you've got your data and Training Peaks, we can go into your dashboard and have a look at your data and make sure that things are running okay, and provide feedback on how your training's progressing and that sort of thing. And then on top of that, we can do custom. We do a custom program that we built from scratch. So they're not just a program that a lot of coaches will just get a standard program that they've created, like I have here. All right, I'll just go back to the programs here, not the athletes. Lost myself. Here we go, calendar. These programs here, they just get these standard programs and they basically load them into your Training Peaks account, and they might tweak it a little bit. But we actually build the custom programs from scratch. specifically around your training. So there are for 12 weeks, $549, and then if you want one-on-one coaching from me, my one-on-one coaching package is $2,500 for the 12 weeks. So those are the packages. Most people that are racing at club level and doing recreational events are looking at these packages down here. For those people that want, when we have quite a few people doing custom, they're here. And for clients that really want the best service and weekly hookups with me to go through their data and talk about their training, and they've got a heavy investment in their training and they really want to achieve really good results, then they go for our one-on-one coaching. So those are the levels of support. We've got some fantastic questions. I'm just going to jump to them now. So I'm just going to turn off my screen sharing. Here we go. And then we've got a little bit of time left. Fantastic. And we'll get through into these questions. So, all right, so Mel's asked the question, I want to understand the role of building in recovery days. Are they simply just a non-bike day or an easier spin day? All right, Mel, so that's a really important question, and recovery days are really important. So, and the reason why that is because we want the athletes, and in our case, the coaching, the clients that we're coaching, we want to have hard days and we want to have really easy days. And that just helps mix up the training, because in a recovery day, you're basically doing active recovery, and that helps you go harder in the harder days. All right, so that's what we want. We want to go easy, hard, so we get this separation in training. Now, a lot of people, before they come onto our programs, they spend a lot of time just making themselves tired. They're going hard all the time, and it means that they're always fatigued, and then that means that they can't really go really hard. They don't actually freshen up. And just understand that the training load it creates adaptation. So the training load helps stimulate your body to adapt. So when you load your body up, it sends a message to your body that you have to get better, all right? But it's actually in the recovery that the adaptation happens. It's in the recovery that the adaptation happens. So that's why we need to build recovery into our training programs all the time. And we go through cycles of 4 weeks. We have 3-week build, 1-week recovery, all right, in all of our training programs. It's very important. And the reason for that is so that we can get our athletes have that lift, all right, in the recovery week. So they have recovery and then they adapt and get better, all right? So we have to create that space in the program for that to happen. So recovery days can be one of two things. So we have recovery and rest days. So we make a definition between those two. A recovery day is a day where they do active recovery. So it may be exercising in the E1 zone, which is a fairly easy zone to ride in. You're able to hold a conversation with the person beside you. You're able to breathe, all right? So, so it's a very relaxed sort of ride. And it's an active recovery. And in some of our cases, the athletes that we're working with at the really highest level, they'll be doing a fairly heavy session maybe in the morning. And then in the afternoon, they actually are doing a recovery session to help them recover from that session in the morning, so that they then go on to do a hard session the following day, if that makes sense. All right. And if they didn't have that recovery session in the afternoon, it meant that they wouldn't, the active recovery, it meant that they wouldn't be able to go hard the following day. All right, so that's recovery. And then we have rest days, and rest days are also important as well. And depends on what level that you're competing, you know, what level you're training at. So for most clients, we may have 1 or 2 days where they're rest days throughout the week. All right, but there are clients, depending on the amount of hours that they're doing, for our clients that are doing sort of 15 to 20 hours, we won't have many days at all where they're actually doing nothing. Whereas the athletes that are doing sort of 6 hours a week, they're generally finding that they're doing 2 or 3 days where they're doing complete rest. All right, so it just depends on the volume that you've got. So Mel, I hope that answers your question. All right, so David, can you expand on the strength component of the training? All right, so so there's a couple of things. Strength component, when we're working on strength, we're working on dropping the cadence. So we may go out and do hills in the weekend. We may do specific sessions on the home trainer where we're developing strength. And for an example, I'll just share my screen again, and I'll share this entire screen, and I'll just go back into Training Peaks. I'm just going into a workout, so 3.2, which is our new version of workouts. I'll just open up home, calendar, just workout library, my library. All right, so just see if I can, I've got to just what I'm going to do is I'm just going to jump onto my account. All right. All right, cool. Okay, so if we go to workout library, we've got some sessions where we're working on strength. Excuse me. So things like 082 hill climber seated and standing, classic 6x5, but we're varying the cadences all the way through to developing power at different cadences, which is really important. For you to develop power on climbs, you need to be able to develop power at different cadences. So, this particular session's designed to help you do that. We've got, this particular session here is designed 084 is to help build extended climbing, maybe standing or seated at lower cadence as well to develop that strength. So that's what we do on the bike. Now, of course, we can do that stuff out on the road as well. And then, of course, strength training here, I'll give you a bit of an example of a strength training exercise. So these are multi-planed exercises. Phase 2, part 2 is always a nice one that I like to pull up. I just check, make sure it's, just bring it up. It just takes a couple of moments to load. Maybe a couple more moments. Here we go. Hopefully, and we get an error. How classic is that? That's okay. Here it is here. So we'll just run into it. And you'll see that these are exercises that you can do at home. So they're very basic exercise. All right, so Matt's just doing a few squats and stuff. So we've got Matt to come in and help us with these. All right, so these are multi-planed exercises. All right, and you'll see that it's not a classic squat by any means. So there's a lot of rotation happening there. And we're getting a lot of imbalance happening here. We're having to stabilize the power off the arms through the core while we're doing these exercises to help develop that core strength. All right, so those are sort of a classic example. Now, with our off the bike strength training program, this is just one of 100 exercises that we've got, and these go from phase 1, part 1, through to phase 6, part 2. So there's actually 12 different videos for our strength training, and each of them have different exercises in them, progressively working on this and developing your strength. So I hope that answers your question around the strength training. I'll stop sharing my screen there. Yep, cool. All right. Okay, what do you think about fish oil pills? Are they are they helpful for speed, recovery, and strength? Haven't tried. We don't have any of our clients on it. I haven't really tried fish oil. I certainly, from a nutritional point of view, I think it's important to eat good food, and eating fish is part of that equation. Look, there's some benefits, but generally, look, I wouldn't be a big pro or a con for fish oil, so I can't really comment on that. David, I'm doing a Newcrest Orange Challenge 170 in just over 4 weeks, but I've only been able to do about 3 decent rides over the last couple of months. I've been consistent with the indoor training sessions. I'm worried about lasting the distance. Do you have any suggestions on what you can do over the next few weeks to prepare? All right, so David, I recommend that you do get out and do a couple of longer rides if you've got the opportunity to do that. That's certainly going to help you. You want to make sure that you don't do them in the last week. Ideally, 3 weeks before an event, we're starting to taper our athletes, like a lot of the hard work's already been done. So, but certainly if it's 3 weeks away, this weekend's probably your last opportunity to get in a longer ride. So that's my recommendation, is certainly, but after this weekend, 2 weeks away, you're kind of pushing it a little bit, because it usually takes, for a longer ride, it may take up to 2 weeks for you to recover. So you don't want to be tired riding into the event. All right. So, okay. So Mel's saying, I'm feeling stale, maybe to the point of overtraining. Is it better to back it off, the intensity of the session, for a few days, or just stop? Depends. Mel, certainly you have to have a look at your data to make a recommendation on that. But if you're feeling stale, you can do one of two things. I'd back it off and do recovery rides just for an hour or two. And E1, just breathing hard, not breathing hard or breathless, just being able to have a conversation and see how you go. After a couple of days, you may need a little bit more than that, and you may need complete rest for a couple of days. So I'd start off with recovery rides first. But certainly, I'm happy to chat to you via email and have a look at your data and make some recommendations. So, yeah, definitely, if you're feeling stale, it's a sure sign that you need a bit of a rest. All right. So Joanna said, to get long sessions together, is it okay to combine easy ride with a hard indoor session, 2 hours in between, and then again continue easy ride just to get the hours in. Okay, well, it depends on whether that's on the same day or not, or over a week. Joanna, I don't know the timings exactly around that. Certainly happy to have a chat to you about that offline if you want. Okay. Do you include nutritional recommendations as part of the training plans and coaching? Absolutely, Ashley. That's a great thing about having unlimited email support, is that you can ask any questions that you want around your cycling. So it may be to do with preparation for an event, or how to climb hills better, or technique, or getting around corners faster, and nutrition, weight training, anything that you want around your training. You just need to fire me off an email and I'll answer that question for you. All right, so certainly, but yeah, answer your question, nutrition's part of that. So we do have a program called the Leaner Cyclist. It's specifically for cyclists that want to lose weight, whether it's whether they want to lose a lot of weight, 40, 50 kilograms, or whether it's just to take the last bit of that, belly fat or whatever off their stomach and stuff. So, all right, so good info. All right, I have a 4-hour ride. Can I combine easy ride with a 2-hour harder ride and then go back indoors to get 4-hour ride? Joanna, certainly you can mix it up a bit. There's no issues with that. Depends on what you want to achieve from that. So, here's the thing. People, they go out training and they like 4 hours, and it's like what you're doing should be building towards what you want to achieve with your riding. And where I see a lot of people go wrong is that they're training hard, but a lot of the training they're doing is not the right training for what they actually want to achieve with their riding. So it's important to make sure that those match. All right. So anyway, look, we're at 8:20, so we've gone for 50 minutes. I'm going to wrap it up here. Look, I really appreciate your time tonight, and thanks for taking the time out to learn a little bit more about training. And hopefully you've gotten a lot out of it. Learned a few things, and I've answered a few questions. All the best with your riding. And certainly if you've got any questions that weren't answered tonight or you want to have answered, you can certainly flick me an email. I'll show you how to do that. I'll just turn my screen on again, share, and then you just basically go to, you can go here to contact. Obviously it looks a little bit different on a mobile phone, and you just type in whatever you want and what's it about and your message, and I'll do my very best to get back to you. All right, so you're welcome. All the best. Take care, and we'll catch you soon.